And so he mentions the founder Ymir. This character is probably the worst written character in this entire series, by far. Literally makes no sense. So it's revealed that a lot of this has been caused by Ymir, and the reason for that is that even after 2,000 years, Ymir still continued to submit to King Fritz, which basically is why we have all the Titan powers and shit, right? So she's still submitting to King Fritz after 2,000 years. Why? Why is Ymir just like still loyal to someone who like abused, tortured, and then eventually killed her? He fed her to his children, right? Like, it was brutal. And the reason was she was in love. Like, what? For 2,000 years? She was in love? That was it? She was waiting 2,000 years so she could be freed from her pain of love? Okay. And the person that's going to free her is Mikasa? Alright, why? Why would it be Mikasa? Alright, there's some obvious parallels in how they grew up, but there was no interactions, no Ymir looking at Mikasa, except for like the very last panel of 138. There wasn't anything leading up to thinking that Ymir was doing all of this with Mikasa in mind, right? That was never shown. I don't know where that came from. It literally felt like it came out of nowhere. Like, why Mikasa? It doesn't really feel like anything. And so you're sitting there, you're like, well, what the fuck? Why would it be Mikasa? And Eren literally replies verbatim with, well, that's something only the founder Ymir would know. What kind of writing is that, Yams? For someone who's like so meticulous with all these details that he would leave behind to then bring again forward, to then just insert this random bullshit arbitrarily, right? It kind of feels like it came out of nowhere. Like, where did this come from? Why does Ymir care about Mikasa at all? And if she does, why didn't we know about it before? Like, where's the reader's payoff for anticipating this? There's two types of readers, right? You get who get payoff from anticipation, and then you just get people who didn't see it coming and get shocked, right? There was no way to anticipate this at all. And then Eren replies, well, that's something only the founder would know. So he literally just writes that off. He literally introduces a new problem, being that that Ymir is still in love. We didn't know that. We had no idea she was still in love. And that the answer was Mikasa. We also didn't know that. But that was also just introduced. And then, why is it Mikasa? Well, who the fuck knows? That's what he says.
Let's begin with the pregnancy and everything to do with Historia. All of it felt entirely pointless. There was so much foreshadowing about this plotline, it's so disappointing that it was a waste of time. The pregnancy has no payoff at all. Historia, in my opinion, the best developed female character in the entire series, is wasted completely. She is essentially written out of the final part of the story. Her entire purpose is to make a baby, and what's even worse is, the father of her child was someone who threw rocks at her. What is Isayama trying to say here? If you harass a female, she might let you have sex with them and carry your child? Get the fuck out of here. That is literally disgusting. It's so sexist. How could they do this to Historia? Her entire character feels wasted and so disappointing. Speaking of sexism, let's get into Ymir. Chapters 119 to 122 give us the backstory of Ymir while Zeke and Eren are in the past. Ymir is raped, tortured, physically and mentally abused by Karl Fritz to the point where she now feels like a slave, and that is who she thinks she is and she can only be. This is all done so Karl Fritz can make an Eldian empire. She stays in the past and obeyed the royal family because of this. So when Eren meets Ymir, what does he say? He says you must have been waiting for somebody who truly understands how you feel. Eren understands all of that. Eren gives a fantastic speech that hits Ymir deeply. She is so moved by his speech that she agrees to go along with Eren's plan, the rumbling. We get the insight that Ymir has been desperately hoping that someday she would meet someone who would understand her. Before chapter 139, we presume that to be Eren. Hell, even in chapter 137, Armin says that the founder Ymir wants to be connected and we assume she is connected to Eren. But boy oh boy were we wrong about that. Enter chapter 139. It is revealed that Ymir loved Karl Fritz. What the absolute hell? What the absolute fuck is that? That is so disgusting. Once again, what is Isayama trying to say here? That physical and mental abuse is okay? That Stockholm Syndrome is the answer to our questions? I'm absolutely blown away by the sexist values presented in this chapter. Everything I just gushed about from chapters 119 to 122 is wrong. Ymir stayed in the past not because she was a slave, but because she loved Karl Fritz, the man who raped, abused, and cut off her tongue. This apparent love is what keeps Ymir in the past and made her decide to keep on making titans. I don't even know what to say. This literally goes against everything chapters 119 to 122 said. All the ideas about Ymir having been drilled into being a slave is wrong. She's instead just in love with Karl Fritz. She's a sim. Ymir didn't jump in the way of a spear not because she lost all the will to live, but because she loved the man who abused her. The answers regarding Ymir and Karl Fritz can all be summarized as Stockholm Syndrome. What the absolute fuck? Ymir getting all hyped up from Eren's speech makes no sense now that we know she was in love with Karl Fritz. Everything from chapter 122 is retconned. Why did Eren say it ends now when he claims that Ymir led him here to tell him that Mikasa was the one she was waiting for? And when Armin asks why Mikasa, Eren says only Ymir knows that one. What? This is such a terrible answer. It's a cop-out. Isayama knows that he can't even begin to explain the weird retcons he did in this Forsaken chapter, so he just says only Ymir knows to dodge it entirely. This is such bullshit. Not only does this feel half-assed, but it ruins Eren even more. In chapter 119 to 122, it feels like Eren does understand Ymir. Zeke thinks that, and most of the readers did too. Now the answer we get as to why Mikasa frees Ymir is only Ymir knows. Fuck off, that's terrible writing and everyone knows that. It's an insult to all of the readers of this series.
So, I will start by saying this. People have, their own way of looking at this, but Ymir being in love with King Fritz is fucking stupid. I'm so sorry. It is utter trash. I'm not saying that Isayama is glorifying that type of abusive relationship, because obviously me thinking Ymir being in love is just obviously the reasons are, bro, King Fritz is a fucking rapist, a murderer, an abuser. Like, bro, what else I could go on and on, man. He's a horrible fucking person. I guess it's Stockholm Syndrome because, she has a broken outlook on love, so that's why it's excused Isayama's not glorifying it. I don't give a fuck if Isayama's glorifying it. It's just not good writing. She was bound by love for 2,000 years, bro. It's stupid as fuck. Like, really? Stockholm Syndrome, bro? And Mikasa had to be the one to show her, bro. So, just to summarize it really quickly, why this is so dumb. If you think it is like a tragic way of using storytelling, good for you. I think it's fucking dumb. But for me, I think that with this, it's like, look at it from this scope. Ymir put the Eldian people through absolute fucking hell. Bro, put them through the damn hell, bro. Through the damn hellhole, whatever we're gonna call it. For 2,000 years. Because she was bound by some fucking freakish ass love, some weird ass love for 2,000 years to this horrible King Fritz. These people have been going through this shit this entire time because you were in love. It just rubs a bad taste in my mouth. Like, bro, where's all the prior great storytelling you had up to this, man? And the next reason why this is so bad is like, she did all that. She ruined Eren's life by putting her on this fucking path to seeing Mikasa cut his head off. So all this shit we've seen in Attack on Titan has been to see Mikasa cut Eren's head off. Like, bro, what? Bro, Isayama's a fucking sadist, bro. Ymir being in love with that man is worse enough, but Ymir's like grand plan being to just wait all these years to find this fucking weird ass couple who are basically fucking siblings to do this shit, and it's really tragic, but this is bad writing, bro. Like, what? Ymir couldn't find any other couple to show her real love, bro, in those years. It had to be Mikasa and Eren, right?
So we all know about this trash. The Ymir being in love with King Fritz. I don't even have to harp on this because everybody knows why this is trash. This woman was tortured, slaughtered, arrows shot through everywhere, running for her life from this man. She chose to die so she could fucking leave him. And that's how mentally fucked she was. She had the power of a titan, and she was so mentally fucked by this man that he had the will to not even tell her to do shit. And then look at this picture right here. Look at this fucking, how dare he draw this? Ain't this the same dude who made his own children eat their mother? He don't love them. He don't love them. No, there's nothing you could ever say to convince me. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous panel. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's move on. That's terrible. Anything about Ymir loving and Eren walking through paths, these are all contradictory. Every single panel. So everything here is, and then this too. Mikasa? You really weren't listening. I was listening. Why is it Mikasa? That's something only the founder would know. That's insulting. That's an insult. That's an insulting thing to say to your audience that has truly devoted their time, their years to you, followed your story, dedicated their hearts to your story. You're gonna tell them that? Shame on you, Isayama. Shame on you. That's the most disrespectful thing I've ever seen. You just changed the main protagonist of the story in the last chapter and said you don't know why. That's never been done before in anything in the history of time. Never been done. I don't even have to look it up. I know it's never been done. Nobody would ever do something so stupid. Who the fuck would want that?
The other thing I'd like to address briefly is the perceived change in Ymir's character. When we first received her true backstory, we were told how she was a slave, and honestly her backstory is pretty brutal. She's a child, forced into subservience, and forced to bear children to the first king. Now, this was just my interpretation, but when she sacrificed herself to save the king's life, I personally didn't find it to be a heroic moment. With the way it was structured, I saw it that she was seeking a reason to die, especially considering how the king demanded that she didn't die, and she didn't appear to use any regenerative capabilities. And what happens to her? Her body is eaten by her children, and she's forced to construct titans for centuries and centuries before Eren breaks her free, saying they will destroy the world together. Now, personally, with how this is constructed, this feels more like Ymir is taking revenge out on a world that tortured her, especially with her completely ignoring Zeke's request. So, how can you turn around and say Ymir actually loved the first king? To me, that seems more like an extremely abusive situation, and it really muddies her character quite a bit. Unlike other characters in the story, such as Erwin and Armin, or Reiner and Eren, who have parallels in their character traits, Ymir is really not like Mikasa at all. Especially since the king tortured her and didn't save her life in any way. He was shown to be truly horrible to her, so from a reading standpoint, to say she truly loved him, it's a bit of an uncomfortable read to say the least.
But then we finally reveal Ymir's whole reasoning, bro, for why she's doing all of this.
Because she's a sick freak with a weird kink.
She's in love with King Fritz. Probably the worst reveal, one of the worst reveals in all of Attack on Titan. Eren literally says it. Ymir's in love with the guy who burned down her whole village.
Cut off her tongue.
Killed her parents, her rapist.
And had her babies eat her.
But yeah, like, she's in love with... This is, like, bad. This is, like, really, really bad. When people say it's, like, it feels like fan fiction, it feels like fan fiction. Like, this is... bro, it's so bad. It's so bad.
And then the crazy thing is, Ymir finds that Mikasa is the person that she was looking to all along for her true understanding of love, would you say?
Basically.
Basically Mikasa freed the shackles of her.
Yeah, this is dumb because back in chapter 122, we see Eren and Paz basically saying, oh, you don't have to be a slave, you could be free. Oh, Ymir, you're the one that led me here. Like, I'll break you out of these chains. And the significance of chapter 122, which is revered as like one of the best chapters in Attack on Titan, it's gone. Like, this whole panel, oh, you've been waiting 2,000 years just for somebody. That was supposed to be Eren, like breaking her out of the chains, breaking her out of the curse, her love for Carl Fritz. But no, chapter 139 completely takes that away, takes the meaning of this whole chapter 122, and she's still bound down by her chains of her love for Carl Fritz. And it's Mikasa that has to break her out.
And the crazy part is, once you wonder why Mikasa is the one that sets Ymir free, Eren never explains it.
Yeah, Eren literally says, oh no, Armin says, like, why is it Mikasa? And Eren literally says, oh, I don't know. Only Ymir knows. And we never get told, why does Ymir need Mikasa? Like, out of the billions of people throughout the 2,000 years she's been alive in paths, why Mikasa?
Yeah, and it can't be the relationship Mikasa had with Eren, because Eren had mutual feelings with her, as opposed to King Fritz, who disregarded her to the max.
So in the manga and even in the anime, and we tried their best to like make a romance, Eren never like shows any like romantic feelings towards Mikasa.
Yeah.
The only time he does is chapter 123 when Eren asks her like, what am I to you? And she's like, oh, your family. Like, before that, there's nothing. Like, it's all like one-sided. It gets even worse when Eren says, oh, Mikasa is the one I love, I don't want her with anyone. He goes complete incel, bro.
Ymir's Stockholm Syndrome is obvious, but her actions are anything but. When asked about her real motivations, all we get is, I don't know, or no one can understand her. Doesn't that seem like a cop-out to you? Also, we have no idea what her actions in 137 mean, and how it relates to what we know of her now. She's a plot device that acts in contradictory ways, when with how much power she has, only having vague and superficial explanations is horribly disappointing.
And it's like, holy shit, did Eren's plan actually work? What's gonna happen to the worm? What is Ymir doing? And then you get to the finale, and it's like, fuck, this sucks. I'm sorry to be so harsh, but it just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, first of all, there's the worst part of that is when Eren explains that Ymir loved Fritz, which is like so fucked up when you think about it for even a second. Like, Ymir was a slave. There's like, she was used by Fritz and like fed to his children. Like, she was used as like a sex slave essentially. And it's like Eren's like, she loved him. That's why she did all of this. And I'm like, this is weird.
But you know, I gotta give it to Isayama. He gave me my favorite ship, Ymir and the abusive King Fritz. And the explanation we got, Eren telling Armin, hey yo Armin, you know, I gotta say, she likes him because she likes him. Because love is blind, bro. And he states that Ymir did all of this out of love for King Fritz. But really? 2,000 years later, and Ymir is still in love with this guy. Now I gotta say, that's some dedication, but you really like a guy that like massacred your entire village and then turned your remaining villagers into a bunch of slaves for his own selfish desires. Why in the world are we bringing in the notion of love into a grim series like this one?
Turns out that Ymir's entire motivation was that she was in love with King Fritz. You know, the man who severely abused her, made her have his children, and then made those children eat her after she died protecting him. On top of that, it also turns out that Mikasa was somehow linked to Ymir the whole time, and Historia's plot had absolutely no relevance whatsoever. I'm here to focus on the writing of this, because that's what I know how to properly analyze. So to break it down, here's what we're going to talk about in order, because there are just some things I do not want to touch with this bullshit. The glorification of genocide. Fuck that. Ymir's love. Fuck that too. And Mikasa's ending. Goddamn, I am disappointed, but somehow not surprised. We have Ymir's love. Mirror, mirror on the wall, what is the stupidest reveal of them all? Wow. Yeah, that's pretty bad. So, after all of these years, and all of this shit, after every single character I've ever liked dying and suffering and an entire fucking genocide, you're telling me all those 2,000 years of suffering were for Stockholm Syndrome? What? You guys, I don't even know what to say about this, like holy hell. Yeah, hey guys, it turns out that Ymir's motivation for all of this wasn't some sort of deep, meaningful reason connected to her desire to be free from her suffering. It was her Stockholm Syndrome-induced love towards her abusive husband this whole time! Wow, yes, I am truly amazed. Astounding. Amazing. Fascinating. Baffled even. I don't need to know what bad writing looks like to see this. I don't have a problem with love being Ymir's motivation for all of this, but that depends entirely on how you handle it. For instance, if she saw and experienced so much suffering and cruelty in the world to the point that she wasn't able to believe that any good actually existed in it, or the love that she saw between that one married couple and that one flashback was real at all, and her loss of hope for the world and humanity in that sense was her motivation, then fine! Sure! I can go with that, why not? And then Mikasa kissing Eren in 138 could prove to her in that instance that yeah, love is real, and there is goodness in the world. And then she drops the whole curse and we're all happy. If that's what happened, then sure, why not? Let's go with that, I can buy that. But no, instead it was the fact that she loved her abusive husband that motivated her this whole time. If you're gonna portray Stockholm Syndrome, you should at least try and portray it properly, and have it actually be respected and meaningful in some way. And this, it's not. Like, I don't know how else to say it to you, but this does not feel like it means anything, because it doesn't.
And this is the part where I get into my rant. The last chapter that I just read. Ymir. The origin of this storyline is garbage. It is so trash. It doesn't make the slightest sense. And then Eren, towards the end, came out and said Ymir fell in love with the king. She was still in love with him. Why? They don't explain it. Why? We don't know. Oh yeah, and also Ymir gave Mikasa the option to take away the powers of the Titans. Why? It just feels like Isayama was like, I just want to end this story. Let me just give me this piece of paper. Let me just end this here right now. You know, I don't want to deal with this origin story anymore. You know, I wrote some BS, and now I just want to end it. You know what? Mikasa is the reason why, you know, Eldians can't turn into Titans anymore. And Ackerman. That's the storyline you went with? And you know what? You guys will take any reasoning, any explanation from these writers, and you'll take it up the butt just because it is what it is. If it doesn't make sense here, it doesn't make sense at all. Why? Like, does that make any sense to you? Why Ymir made Mikasa made the decision? Why? Like, you had one chapter to explain everything, right? And this is the BS that you give us? It doesn't make sense. It's trash. But since Attack on Titan was held on such a high level, people will not bring it down. Not me though. I don't care. I'll call it for what it is. You YouTube channels that are giving this a pass, I ain't giving it a pass. Trash. This is a trash ending. Isayama, this is a scum writer move. I said in the previous video, Isayama is a scum writer. A lot of people got on me. Oh, bro, you're taking it too far. No, I'm not. If you paid for this, guess what? You're supposed to write a review about it. You're supposed to give your opinion on why it is good or bad. I'm giving a reason why it's trash. This is trash. We've been reading this manga all these years just for Mikasa to make the final call.
Then Eren's like, let's go off and talk about the founder Ymir. So 2,000 years ago, the founder Ymir continued to submit to King Fritz, leading to the Titan powers that we see today. That's right, even after obtaining the power that rivaled God, she continued to submit to an enemy that burned down her home, killed her father and tore out her tongue. Why would she do that? It's hard to believe, but the founder Ymir was in love with Karl Fritz. Look at this. This is the face of someone in love whilst the king is with some other bitches. She's so in love. We've seen from all the panels previously of Ymir that she was just desperately in love with King Fritz, who would be like, get up, Ymir, what are you doing? My slave, get up, get up. So already, this is a big problem. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, easy. Well, Ymir just had Stockholm Syndrome. The King Fritz, the original King Fritz, was a pedo, because she was like a kid, you know, when she got the time powers. So he was a nonce, and also a rapist. So he was like, I'm just going to give you my seed, or you can bear my children. She didn't have a say in it, tongue was torn out, and she was a slave, you know. So one could easily take that and say, clearly she had Stockholm Syndrome. Here's the problem. The text does not treat it as such. We can look at it and infer the one about Stockholm Syndrome, but the text is not treating it as that. That's the true reason that Ymir's restriction has persisted for the last 2,000 years. I couldn't look any deeper into the founder Ymir's heart. I know for certain she was in pain, wishing for freedom. She waited 2,000 years hoping that someone would free her from the pain of her love. Yes, Ymir, the founder, was in love with her abuser. This isn't the only female character that's sort of being shafted over, so it's not preemptive for me to say that sends a terrible message to your female demographic. Thank you, Isayama, very cool. Finally, she arrived. That person was Mikasa. Mikasa was the one that freed Ymir. Why was it Mikasa? Well, that's something only the founder Ymir would know. That, my friends, is such an ass pull. That really is. What was the motivation? Dunno. It's not the only. Dunno. The next dunno comes along in a few pages' time. I understand, like, leaving some mystique, but that to me is just bad writing, but okay.
On another note, there are so many plot threads that just went absolutely nowhere. Mikasa being royalty, the cop-out that is Ymir being in love with her husband who burned down her home, killed her father, and tore out her tongue, the father of Historia's child just being a random farmer, the founding Titan worm that everybody was just fighting. After Eren dies, I suppose the worm dies too, even though that was never brought up or vocalized to the reader. This ending was obviously both rushed and slapped together with little regard for the audience, and I can't begin to imagine the type of individual who would be so happy to receive something with such blatant disregard for story structure and plot points. You know, never mind, I think I can't imagine it. Why exactly did Mikasa make Ymir happy? Who cares? It's not like the fucking job of the author is to answer questions about the world and how it works, I guess.
But no, he is the character that seeks freedom, but he's stuck to paths laid out by Ymir, who I'm going to reiterate one more time. I don't understand what the fuck her motive was. Also, Ymir's in love with the king?
Oh man, dude.
It's revealed that Ymir did all this because she actually loved the king.
Isayama hates woman, dude.
He must, because dude, Ymir was assaulted, like sexually assaulted. She was breed like a cow. Her children ate her. to become the first 3 Titans after her. Like, that's just straight up abuse. And I understand Stockholm Syndrome's a thing, but that is extreme.
Everyone on the Reddit was saying the same thing, man. Like, yo,
Oh,
Stockholm
really?
Syndrome is real, but come on.
To that extent, it's insane. It's 2,000 years later, and you're still doing this because you love the king? That is so dumb.
And then I feel like Isayama tried doing this whole, it's like poetry, you know, where like now we have Historia also in love with the dude that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's why she chose Mikasa, for love.
One plot device I know every fan of Attack on Titan can agree is questionable and objectively bad writing is Ymir Fritz's character. The flaws she brought to the entire story with the revelations from chapter 139 are pretty obvious. Ymir's conclusion came so out of left field that we're literally breaking our necks for it to make cohesive sense, especially with how much emphasis the manga gave her in multiple important chapters that shaped the skeleton of the story. For example, looking back at chapters 119 through 135, the relationship between Ymir and Eren was highlighted to be an important foreshadowing, especially since the titles of chapter 1 and chapter 122 were complementary. I mean, it's not even the visual imagery or dialogue now, guys, it's even the chapter titles that are indicating a connection spanning over 2,000 years. The one chapter we received Ymir's backstory in chapter 122, the entirety of her story is about suffering under abuse, having no free will due to slavery, and being forced into things which rippled 2,000 years later to the cast we love. There is nothing to help support the notion within chapter 139 that Ymir is in love with King Fritz. This twist left a bitter taste in everybody's mouth. I mean, when you first read chapter 139, you see Eren stating Ymir was in love with Karl Fritz. Now, when I saw the name Karl, I was like, wait, what? What? Karl Fritz, the 145th king and the dude that made the vow? That makes no sense. Then I realized, oh shit, let me read this again. Oh, the ancient king from 2,000 years ago. His name was Karl Fritz too, before we just knew him as King Fritz. What's the point of Isayama even doing that? I don't get it. Why did he do that? It caused confusion for no reason. I know that's a nitpick, but I just wanted to mention that. Yeah. Furthermore, why did Isayama use visual imagery in chapter 135 regarding the pigs and fences once again? To reinforce to readers to believe it's about breaking the walls and one's idea to gain freedom, as Ymir could see herself as cattle just like the pigs, but she was a good girl that fought differently, that sought to free them from their slaughter to a tyrannical king, metaphorically speaking of herself and the wider society. I mean, what's the point of chapter 122 and Historia's parallel of calling Ymir a good girl, going against how the world views her as the devil that is the origin of all hatred and chaos in the world? This very same chapter is when we learn her backstory with the precognition to believe Historia's words and Isayama's storytelling. We saw Historia break the Reese curse, which made Eren realize that this is what he needs to do. This is why Eren stated she's the girl who saved him that day, the worst girl in the world. Go look back at that cave scene. We saw Eren not wanting to live in his nihilism. Then he realized that he must live for himself, just like Historia decided to do. Isayama stated in interviews that this is when Eren realized that everything must be done for his own good, which gives reason to why Eren let people like Sasha and Hange get killed, since he must keep moving forward to see the end result and he cannot change the events. This links back to Ymir Fritz, because you have to look at how every event of Attack on Titan is interlinked in this huge chain, and why chapter 139 has undone the chain, making everything confusing and out of order. The philosophy that Historia explained to Eren, she gained it from her best friend Ymir, the person that taught her to live for herself. I know people would like to argue that we are seeing parallels and dots that do not exist or connect, but this isn't the case and can be debunked. Historia's philosophy definitely got imbued into Eren's character once she saved his life. Credit to Violet's Magic on Twitter for doing the work. Take a look at this image of different manga panels connecting to one another. Historia even mentioned, I think humanity's the problem, we should just let the Titans destroy mankind, and even refers back to Ymir Fritz. I can't be a good girl, and I don't want to be a god. Every single famous quote of Historia is repeated by Eren to Ymir Fritz when he meets her in the paths, where he states to Ymir that she should put an end to the world, that she has been waiting for him for over 2,000 years and led him there, that Ymir should finally use her free will for once after undoing her chains of listening to royal blood. Eren even repeats the notion that you're no slave, you're no god, you're just a human being. So at At this point, you cannot really deny the blatant foreshadowing and storytelling that fans saw, and how chapter 139 was a slap in the face.
You slapped me, you monkey!
Marry me. Now, during chapters 119 to 122, we are given the backstory of Ymir, right? Whilst alive, we learned Ymir was raped, used, and cannibalized by King Fritz to his selfish desire in expanding the Eldian Empire for power and wealth. We are led to believe Ymir was mentally and physically abused to the point where the mentality of a slave was ingrained in her. This would have made sense why she stayed in the paths and obeyed the will of the royal family. If Ymir was in love, then she should not have chosen death when she got spared by a traitor to save King Fritz. Even the king himself admits that the wound she suffered is not bad enough to kill her. However, she does end up dying, and we all saw this as a tragic gateway of freedom from her misery. Think about it, you have to question yourself and ask, how did Ymir Fritz lose the will to live and die by a spear if it wasn't for oppression and the theme of wanting freedom? If Ymir was in love with King Fritz, why didn't she continue to serve him? We were told that the healing factor of Titans is linked to the will to live. This is a fact. So how did she lose the will to live if she actually loved him? That's an oxymoron and therefore objectively bad writing. Why would Ymir decide to die and go to the paths and enslave the world for 2,000 years just to listen to him? In fact, we see her doing it again with Zeke Yeager in chapter 122. She was almost about to listen to Zeke's euthanization plan until Eren broke the chains literally, metaphorically, and symbolically to stop it. So now, do we have to believe that this scene was done for cheap dramatization? Oh my god, bruh! So wouldn't it make more sense that she lost the will to live because she was fed up with a tyrant but was a small child, brainwashed and afraid? So she couldn't let go of the chains until Eren came and freed her by understanding her heart. This is then highlighted when Eren says she isn't a god and just a human. Ymir Fritz is a plot device. Her whole character didn't even speak once in the entire manga. She was someone that was used to move the plot forward and represent the cruelty of power held in the wrong hands and the oppression that it causes. Eren was meant to juxtapose King Fritz, not be his representation. Ymir is a walking plot hole and hypocrite because she goes against everything she was meant to represent. She in the end is indeed the devil instead of the victim. She forced Eren to do the rumbling in hindsight and forced Mikasa to make a decision to kill him. She enslaved the world for 2,000 years due to something unexplainable and what 99% of the fandom cannot even relate to or sympathize with, instead of the other theme regarding freedom and going against oppression and racism, which 99.9% of the fandom, no, not even 99.9%, 100% of the fandom can sympathize with and defend. So thank you to Claydoll1091 from Reddit for this thread. He puts it pretty well. It is absurd for Eren to suggest to Ymir and readers, did you lead me here to tell me how you have been waiting 2,000 years for Mikasa? If he meant so, then he shouldn't have said it ends now in that very same chapter, because it hadn't ended yet at that moment without Mikasa. Also, if Mikasa and the agony of love were the key overall, Eren should not have mentioned you're no slave, you're no god, because none of these mattered for the concepts of obsession and love. Another point I want you to understand is, why is Eren parasailing Historia's words where she stated the same thing to Eren in his nihilism and lowest point of his life where he wanted to die? This is how Ymir Fritz felt 2,000 years ago, which made the spear kill her, right? This sentiment is perpetuated once again when Eren does this for Ymir, who was suffering and going through the same feelings Eren was. So no, fans are not connecting dots that do not exist when there are clear parallels in everything that is being unfolded. Why would Eren speak the exact same words as Historia did if it wasn't for the thematic nuance of Eren being the only one able to understand Ymir's suffering, and so she waited 2,000 years for him to arrive and undo the chains? That's why she stopped listening to Royal Blood and didn't listen to Zeke Yeager. In fact, our analysis is agreed upon by the creator of Attack on Titan himself, and he reaffirmed the beliefs of fans in regards of his storytelling. Isayama stated in the interview that when Eren realized that he had his destined path because of his father, at that point he could no longer lie to himself or anyone else, and thus felt I shouldn't be living in this world, and that was pretty much his situation. However, it was Historia, when she ended the curse of Reese, he decided that he must do the same. Everything must be done for his own good, and when you think about things this way, it's easier to understand Eren. So even the creator himself is telling his readers that Eren is a selfish person, he's listening to Historia, and she is the one that saved him. He's embodying her character and her philosophy. I just don't understand how people can try to say to fans that are upset, you're connecting something that doesn't exist. Then why is Isayama lying to his own fans in interviews? That doesn't make any sense. Why is he telling us to think in a certain manner of the story? So as you can see, the author of Attack on Titan is stating that Eren realized everything that must be done for his own good, not for the sake of others, unless Isayama is being as meta as Eren was with the events that unfolded. Like, are you telling me that Isayama was lying for years upon years, just like Eren, even in interviews regarding his own interpretation of his story and characters? Like, take a look at the following panels. You clearly see that Eren believes Ymir has been waiting for him, not Mikasa. It is made clear to the readers that Eren is the one that understands Ymir's heart, whilst Zeke did not. In chapter 137, it even reminds us of this, where Zeke mentioned that even hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years he spent in the paths, he still couldn't figure out Ymir's desire, whilst Eren could understand something he could not. Eren understood the pain and loneliness Ymir felt while serving as a slave, as he himself felt that way in his nihilism, but he kept pushing forward for freedom. When Eren says it ends now, he is referring to Ymir's exploitation and suffering by the Eldian Empire. She was forced to create titans to fuel their conquest. We then come to understand that Ymir goes along with the rumbling because of Eren's speech giving her the liberation and love, something she seeked her whole life. Eren finally embraced her, and she makes a distressed expression just like him when he kissed Historia's hand. Ymir has been told that she is free to unleash her suffering upon the world that wronged her, instead of following the notion of the royal bloodline. I mean, why is she about to listen to Zeke otherwise in the same chapter, if she knew the plan all along revealed in chapter 139, which was Mikasa being chosen by her and Eren was on the destined path? This doesn't make any objective sense other than the fact for dramatization, which is cheap. That don't make no sense. Ymir's second desire is made painfully obvious to the readers. Not only does she want to be free from her chains, but she wants love and to experience a human connection. This explains why she stayed in the paths, to try to form such a connection with all her descendants, waiting for one of them to come and save her whilst understanding her heart, which was Eren. Thus the whole notion of chapter 1's title connecting to 122. Armin theorized this himself in chapter 137, stating, I think it's because the founder Ymir wants to be connected. This would explain why Ymir cried at Eren's speech whilst he embraced her, as this was finally achieved and someone understood her suffering. Why would Ymir cry at Eren's embracing speech if she was in love with Karl Fritz the whole time? She should be happy that Eren has kept moving forward to be a sacrificial lamb and her fetish to be fulfilled, destroying that bot. We are left with zero clues that Ymir was in love with King Fritz, whilst a plethora of link chains point towards it being about freedom and a connection with her children, which is Eren's desire, not Mikasa's. If you boil down the events of Attack on Titan and how it started, the pill that you have to swallow is that it's not based upon the idea of destroying oppression and finding love with the whole idea of Ymir freeing animals to see how it felt like, but it's about destroying love and accepting that freedom is an illusion. This results in a dissatisfying conclusion to a masterpiece. We can't take away anything from this ending that has any meaningful impact to us. Why do you think so many fans have said they felt nothing when they read the chapter, or have stopped thinking about Attack on Titan and don't care about it anymore? When a masterpiece ends, it should be the opposite. You should remember it in a good manner and care about the message it gave you. Anyways, in chapter 139, when Eren states that he can't claim he understands the depths of Ymir's heart, it essentially retcons every interaction we saw Eren have with her. Lastly, another point I need to drive home, and shout out to MTN Drones for a very comprehensive Reddit post on this. Shout out to them. Shout out to everyone that made this video possible because it's so massive. But they stated in the thread, the notion that Ymir will end the Titan curse once she is free further reinforces how her character was retconned. Based on that logic, Ymir should have been able to end the curse back in chapter 122, as Eren had reached out and broken King Fritz's grasp over her. That's why she doesn't listen to royal blood anymore. Isayama realized this, so he decided to change Ymir's motivations in the last chapter for the Mikasa reveal to make sense, even though Eren had clearly freed her before chapter 139. It is ridiculous for Eren to have suggested, did you lead lead me here to tell me you have been waiting 2,000 years for Mikasa? This is all thrown out with the revelation of chapter 139. We have to believe that Ymir was a victim of her own doing, and she was indeed the devil that enslaved the whole human race for 2,000 years with the curse of Ymir, as she is the final villain. She is the one that caused Eren to be on the path he did and forced Mikasa to kill her lover for her own selfish satisfaction to let go of her love. Also, I know people are going to have defense for her saying that she has Stockholm Syndrome, but this just isn't the case. We cannot use this as an excuse to defend how Ymir was in love with the king. With Stockholm Syndrome, hostages or abuse victims may come to sympathize with their captors. This is the opposite of the fear, terror, and disdain that they may be expected from the victims in this situation. Ymir never showed happiness or sympathy for the king in any given situation we were shown. King Fritz never treated her well for her to gain Stockholm Syndrome. He treated her like shit. In actuality, we saw fear and disconnect from herself, like a turtle hiding in a shell. Ymir was never a hostage or captive either. She had godlike powers that let her conquer the world. She could have easily killed him at any point of time by squishing him. It was not Stockholm Syndrome, guys. You need to research what that means, bruh. Also, speaking of the hallucigenia, what even is this thing? We are introduced to it again in chapter 137, 2 chapters before the ending, and before we learn anything about something that made this entire story happen. It just dies. The hallucigenia is introduced as possibly being from outer space, and with there being multiple of them alive, as we see in the introduction. It then attaches itself to Ymir, turns her into a giant, and then upon her death we are meant to believe that it creates a pocket dimension for Ymir, free of both time and space. The worm also has the power to connect an entire lineage of people and give them the power to also turn into giants, as this was Ymir's way of protecting herself according to Zeke, which, by the way, are we not going to question how Zeke had the knowledge he did in chapter 137 on this ancient creature? Ymir Fritz doesn't even speak, so how did Zeke even have this information? There are a lot of loose ends and it's rushed, making for an absolutely bewildered fanbase when Attack on Titan ended. Another factor I would like to point out on why Ymir Fritz is a walking contradiction in the whole story is that we have to point out that this hallucigenia was sentient and wanted to survive. It's the final villain with her. Remember when it pops out of Eren's head as its own entity and turns people into titans? This at first makes it appear as if getting out of Eren was the entire goal so they could kill it, since it's very clear that it wants to go back to him, right? However, we never really know for sure. All we know is that it has a mind of its own and it survives a nuclear explosion, but it dives off screen when Eren dies. We believe that the worm was the curse, and that was Eren's big brain intention of letting it out of the Titan so that it could die and therefore destroy the concept of Titans in the entire world. But this turns out to not be the case, and we get a worse excuse that Ymir was in control of everything the whole time because she wanted to see her simulation with Mikasa and Eren completed. This in itself makes no sense, since the logic behind this is stupid. Eren believing he used free will and his own ideology to gain freedom made sense for the overall structure of the story. But now when you break things down holistically and realize Mikasa was chosen the whole time by Ymir Fritz, you have to question yourself, how does she have the knowledge? Ymir Fritz is basically a 4-dimensional being looking at 3-dimensional humans, as she can perceive the past, present, and future. So if she chose Mikasa as the destined one that is capable of ending her curse due to her knowledge, then what was the point of enacting the destruction of the world for 2,000 years? With the storytelling we have now, it means that Ymir already had preemptive information that Mikasa would succeed. So why wasn't the knowledge of the future Ymir possessed enough for her to end the curse? She knew that humanity is great and is capable of destroying her attachment of the love she has for King Fritz. It just makes Ymir not seem like a victim, but indeed the devil and selfish. The time travel aspect of the show has been completely ruined. The hallucigenia does not make any sense in itself, as we see it operating on its own. And without Ymir and Eren, I could have seen it attach itself to a new host like it did originally with Ymir. Why didn't it just do that? But instead, it just disappears with no explanation. The anime will probably fix this, as well as the additional pages that have already been announced. I think all of us would have had no issue if the origin of Titans were not revealed any further beyond Ymir having it attached to her. But just throwing it into the story in one chapter before the ending just feels like such an odd writing choice. I cannot stress how bad it is to be introduced to the entire reason this mythos exists and know nothing about it. We know nothing about the hallucigenia worm, but it got killed off screen for the big last chapter. It felt so anticlimactic. Now let's talk about Historia's subplot.